So I'm just going to refer to living classrooms as living classrooms and drop off the foundation. My name is Eddie. I'm presenting on my experience as a Black internship, Black Maritime Legacy internship for living classrooms. The Black Maritime Legacy internship is all encompassing, and there are different aspects that different interns work on. So I'm only going to focus on my specific experience with it. Before we get into living classrooms, just a little information about me that's kind of relevant. My major is history and sociology. I'm an interdisciplinary major, a philosophy minor. Technically class of 2022, although I don't graduate till December, so they call me class of 2023. My general research interests tend to be 20th century US transit history, 19th century Maryland state history, historical materialism, French, German, existentialism. Those are all topics that really fascinate me. And fun fact about myself, even though I'm a history sociology major, philosophy minor, I was an award-winning engineering student in high school. More no. So I'm going to talk very briefly about living classrooms as a general company. Living Classrooms is a really large company, really large nonprofit. So it's not even remotely feasible for me to cover everything that Living Classrooms is, but I hope to give a nice overview of the company in general. So Living Classrooms was founded in 1985 as the Lady Maryland Foundation. It was originally founded to preserve Baltimore's legacy of pungy schooners, which is a very specific type of schooner that was believed after the turn of the century, after 1900, was believed to be extinct. It wasn't until Living Classrooms was founded as the Lady Maryland Foundation that the schooner, the art of the pungy schooner, was brought back to Baltimore. The current CEO, and I'll ask everybody to keep his name in the back of your heads for later in the presentation. His name is James P. Bond, and Living Classrooms is organized into 4 major divisions, generally speaking: education, family, community, health and wellness, workforce development. Here is a list of just some of what they're working on, some of the more notable examples here. In terms of education, they run the Crossroads Public Charter School, the Inspire to Serve internship program. They, of course, focus on STEM and marine education through the Lady Maryland Pungy Schooner Initiative. In terms of family community, they run the Historic Ships of Baltimore and the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Museum and Park. Try saying that 5 times fast. Health and wellness, their biggest aspect, in my view, is a Safe Streets Baltimore initiative, which aims to reduce gun violence in Baltimore, specifically their economic opportunity zone. And in terms of workforce development, their biggest initiative is the Broadway Overlook Center, which I think Leah is going to cover upon a little more in her presentation. Pictured here, you have the Crossroads School, the Baltimore paddle boats, and the historic ships in Baltimore. Speaking of their economic opportunity zone, Living Classrooms, as such a large organization, has had a measurable and rather outsized impact on the outcomes of this particular community. 661 potentially dangerous conflicts have been mediated by the Baltimore Safe Streets Initiative. 2,820 students benefited from free virtual environmental education during the pandemic. There was a 14.3% reduction in gun-related violence within the Safe Streets Initiative locations, and a 42% reduction in recidivism within the LCF workforce development programs. So as a Black Maritime Legacy intern, I was brought on as a research intern for historical research. Living Classrooms, as such a large company, Living Classrooms as such a large company and one that's been focused on history, is always seeking to document history, always seeking to preserve it, but doesn't actually have a full-time historian on staff. And so they selected me, they selected me as a research intern to help start their various research initiatives in that respect. So a typical day, typical internship day for me, there is no office, there's no coworkers. I have yet to actually visit the Living Classrooms headquarters in Fells Point. And instead, most of my internship days are completely self-guided, self-determined, self-oriented, and I hop a bus and I visit a location where I pull up tax records, or I pull up telephone records, or I pull up old maps from 1886. And I just look at these, I gather information, I document information about the various historical projects. One project in particular, but I'll get to that later in the presentation. Just some of the locations I've visited: the MD Center for History and Culture, the Maryland State Library Resource Center, also known as Enoch Pratt Free Central Library, the Maryland State Archives, the National Archives, the Baltimore Museum of Industry, and Greenmount Cemetery. So there's one major success of my internship. I was assigned to research the history of the building that's pictured here. This is the Ferndale Fence and Awning Company building. And through my research, we have now documented proof that this building, this picture being taken about 2021, this building dates back all the way to 1783, and it was owned by Elisena Bond, a direct descendant of Living Classrooms CEO James Bond. The research I'm doing for this building is going to be displayed on a commemorative plaque once they hold the grand opening for the building. It's currently being renovated as another career development option for the community. And the exterior of the building will be part of the Isaac Myers Maritime Park, which is directly across the street from this particular building. And that is the majority of my success. I've worked on a couple of smaller other genealogical projects that I'm kind of impressed with myself on. I was able to document the history of a family, very prominent family from the Eastern Shore, who had a very famous, very famous naval captain that passed away in Baltimore. That was also really exciting. So in terms of my intellectual growth, for those of you that are tired of hearing the words face work, I am not covering face work because there was really no face work. I interacted with my supervisor maybe 45 minutes to an hour each week. And that's it in terms of that. So I focus more instead on the difficult task of applying history to sociology. Many people view the two fields as completely unrelated, but they are actually very much related. And that comes through how I grew with respect to the sociological imagination. Dr. Conradi could tell you, I struggled really much trying to figure out how this particular internship fit within a sociology internship. And it's only through furthering my understanding of C. Wright Mills's sociological imagination and being able to remove myself remove myself from the specific context and move to the broader context, that I was able to really understand the sociological significance of the work that I'm doing. Speaking of the sociological significance of the work I'm doing, that falls into a couple of categories. I've just labeled it generally as a sociology of history, but really it's identity formation in respect to how communities identify with the history they learn about, story and truth telling. What is history but stories, and what stories that we take to be truth, and how nonprofits interact with the broader community. As I mentioned before, there is no full-time professional historian on staff in living classrooms. So instead, living classrooms relies on the community to bring the stories to them, relies on the community to help them document the stories, research the stories, and preserve the stories for future generations. And in this respect, while living classrooms is very much giving back to the community, they are also very much part of the community and reliant on the community. In terms of self-growth, there's a couple of things that I've noticed I've grown in. Networking is one of them. I've never been great at networking, and since I've basically been doing all this historical research on my own, I've had to build my own network. That list includes like the head groundskeeper at the Greenmount Cemetery. We had a very long conversation. There are so many individuals that I have benefited, and I've had to establish that networking myself. And so I feel I've actually grown in that particular skill. Professional research decorum and historic document preservation go hand in hand with each other. If you are documenting the history of anything, you are dealing with documents from 1800, you need to act professionally, also need to handle these materials with care so that the next generation can benefit from them. Information condensing and prioritization go hand in hand. I've had it's a 300-year-old building. How do you take 300 years of history and put it on a small plaque? And that's something I'm currently working on. And that's something I feel I've grown in understanding. Map reading. So pictured here, you have a 1986 Saxe map of the building, followed by a 1955 and a 1910 Sanborn Insurance Company map of the building I'm researching. A lot of the research I've been doing are based off of these maps. And this is a skill that I've actually grown very, very much. I mean, I've learned to use Google Maps for everything, and you can't use Google Maps when you look at these older maps. So map reading really becomes a vital skill. When all is said and done, given my intellectual growth and my self-growth, I feel that I am a strong fit for this kind of work. I very much enjoy learning the history. I very much enjoy documenting the history. I very much enjoy talking and teaching about the history of these things. So I think I am a strong fit for this kind of work. Finally, with respect to the research I'm doing for the final paper of this class, I'm not able, because I've had so little interaction with the company itself, I'm not able to really comment or research any particular aspect of the company. So instead, I want to know why what I'm doing is sociologically significant, why documenting the history of this building is so important for the community, so important for living classrooms, and really important for Baltimore across the board. And so I'm really focusing on how the impact of history and historical education informs and shapes the identity of a community in general. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you.